India's financial services sector is poised to grow on the back of rising incomes, significant government attention, and the increasing pace of digital adoption. The long term fundamentals of the sector are sound, but the Indian government openness to private players and foreign participation is likely to remain patchy. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Analytics Inside, where we dive deep into the most pressing issues and innovative developments shaping industries across the globe. Today, we are focusing on the financial services industry and how it is navigating the complexities of advanced technologies and security measures, especially in a dynamic and rapidly evolving market like India. Our guest today is Reuben Koh, Director, Security Technology and Strategy, Asia Pacific and Japan of Akamai Technologies, who has been at the forefront of technological advancements within the financial sector, working to not only integrate cutting-edge solutions but also tackle the unique challenges this sector faces. Now, in a world where security threats are constantly evolving and institutions are rapidly digitizing, it's critical to understand how to safeguard the financial system while enhancing customer experiences. Now, without a further ado, let's get started. Reuben Koh, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us. How are you doing?
Doing very well, Priya. Thank you for having me.
Great. Reuben, let's get started. And, to set the stage for our listeners, could you help us understand or brief us about your organization and specialization? What's the core mission of the company? And, what role do you play in the financial services industry?
Sure. So I'll give a quick introduction of Akamai Technologies, which is where I'm working at, before diving into specific responsibilities as well. So firstly, Akamai Technologies has been in the industry for over 25 years. We were the pioneer of the content delivery network segment of the industry. 1 or 2 decades ago, we kind of invented that space. And what we did was really to accelerate and optimize web and application experiences across the world. So even today, the world's largest companies and organizations depend on us to move their applications and web data at lightning speed across the world, which is why today Akamai has the world's largest edge network to facilitate that. And also at the same time, we are also moving very quickly into the cybersecurity space because a lot of our customers actually asked us to provide not only content acceleration, but also cybersecurity to protect their investments and infrastructure. And very recently, we also acquired a cloud computing company that allows our customers to not only to accelerate, protect, but also build their applications and web content on our platform. So that's a nutshell of what Akamai Technologies do today. And specifically, as for myself, I work in the security strategy team at Akamai. So what I do is to really focus on the security optimization of a specific customer's organization, as well as the alignment of security strategies. And a lot of those customers happen to be in finance. So we have very, very heavy investments in financial organizations across the world. We are basically covering and protecting the top 10 banks and financial institutions across the world. And we also happen to be the founding member of FSISAC's Critical Provider Program. So hopefully that gives you a very quick overview of what Akamai do and what I do at Akamai.
Well, yes, definitely. And that sounds like a powerful combination of expertise and innovation. It's really amazing to hear about your focus in the company, and it's quite innovative, I must say. I think when we talk about more, Reuben, I think you have played a very pivotal role in shaping security strategies across various organizations. And, you have the expertise to protect critical infrastructure and enhance security postures in a very evolving digital landscape. So, if you could tell us more about yourself, how has the journey been till date, and, what are some contribution towards Akamai?
So the journey has been really exciting so far because working with various customers in various industry really exposed us to a lot of interesting challenges and also success. So I think a lot of that really is stemming from the dynamic landscape of cybersecurity per se, that it is not a place where everything sits still, everything changes on a daily basis. And especially when we talk about financial services, it's even more interesting because when we look at FSIs or financial institutions across the world, they are very unique in a sense that they are juggling with multiple aspects of their daily business. So, for example, it's not just about protecting the data and the infrastructure. They're also looking at complying with regulations because finance just happens to be one of the most regulated industries on earth. And at the same time, they're also keeping an eye out in terms of how do I promote innovation within my financial company as well, my bank, for example, by leveraging on cutting edge technologies, processes, as well as prototypes out there that's able to give us an edge in the financial markets. So I think from that example, we have learned a lot, and we continue to be a part of many of our customers in finance, their journey towards digitization and also towards adoption and embracing the next generation of cutting edge technologies.
Well, that was very well said, I must say. And of course, when we are talking about the financial industry, for example, I think the financial services industry is undergoing a very massive shift because it is driven by new technological advancements. There are regulation compliance pressure, then again, cybersecurity risks, and of course, a very fierce competition from fintechs. And also, let's not forget the ever evolving customer preferences. So while technology has definitely caused disruption, I think businesses looking to thrive in today's landscape must embrace digital transformation. And switching from traditional legacy systems to something very fast and intuitive is not easy. Because there are a lot of factors that come into picture when we're trying to implement these new technologies, but it's very essential to keep up with these new customer demands. So, I want to understand from you, Rubin, like what are some of the different or unique challenges the Indian FSI sector has to face compared to other developed markets, and how do you think the country is adapting to these challenges?
Go back to your question earlier, and I'll refer to the points that you actually mentioned. So I'll start off with legacy systems. So in India, financial institutions, legacy systems just so happen to be something that's very common across the board because it's something that's been in place that's worked well for them for, I don't know, years and years. And a lot of them actually don't think about replacing it or upgrading it or doing anything about it. However, when digital transformation sets in, they realize that this is something that we have to change because in order to accommodate those new processes in our operations, we need the infrastructure, the applications to align to that new processes. And legacy systems kind of are an area that is, I wouldn't say holding them back, but it's an area that they are challenged with in terms of how do I move very quickly or move quicker into digitization while at the same time addressing the limitations my legacy systems are posing to me. So one of the unique challenges in finance, Indian financial organizations, is a lot of them are embracing or moving very quickly to the shift towards digital banking, mobile payments, fintech adoption, and so on. But at the same time, they are trying to move off legacy while doing that. And the truth is, it's not going to happen overnight. Right. So even for banks that have shifted or introduced a cloud strategy on moving a lot of stuff to the cloud, not everything is going to happen in 2 weeks, for example. It's going to be a long drawn process because we're talking about processes and applications and infrastructure that's been in place for decades. So in order for them to move legacy towards cloud, it's going to take a bit of time. And at the same time, while doing that, while the transition is happening, it will inevitably introduce some level of risks because right now you're no longer looking at a single environment where everything is under control. You can see and touch everything because right now you're looking at 2 to 3 or even 4 different environments that may or may not be under your jurisdiction because you're using a cloud provider. A lot of stuff are not under your control anymore. So banks are looking at these with different lenses in terms of how do I align and how do I adapt to all these new security challenges. So that's probably the first one. The second one is around supply chain. So you mentioned fintechs. So the way I see fintechs in a financial world is it's both a competitor and a partner at the same time to legacy financial providers. Some of them are are embracing a partnership with fintechs because they allow them to move quicker into the market without spending time and money to build this kind of applications and expertise on their own. Whereas at the same time, other providers are competing with the fintechs because they have overlapping solutions and technologies also addressing the same market segment. But because of that, we see a shift in terms of not only is this happening, but there also happen to be a collaborative ecosystem that's being built where, a legacy financial provider not only can consume from the ecosystem, as a digital supply chain from fintechs, for example, but they also can be a provider to other consumers within the ecosystem, meaning you're both using services as well as selling your services to other consumers. So as part of the ecosystem, what this means is that suddenly it's no longer just a standalone entity where, security is probably pretty much under control. Now you're exposing yourself, via APIs, for example, to other providers, other fintechs as part of the supply chain ecosystem. And that introduces very unique risks into the bank, for example, that they would have never anticipated of opening up the organization in the first place. So this is the second one. The last one, and this is uniquely India, is around the financial inclusion gaps. So for all the digitization and all the cutting edge technology adoption India banks are putting forth, there's still a pretty substantial amount of population in India that are unbanked. So either they don't have a bank account, they don't do banking transactions, or they have very, very limited financial literacy. What this means is that for this population that have either low banking activity or very low financial literacy, they are very vulnerable to scams and phishing and social engineering attacks that might impersonate a bank, for example. So this is an area that I think banking sector and the financial sector in India acknowledges and are very well aware of. And they are putting in efforts to try to educate and putting mitigations in place to ensure that literacy, financial literacy improves. But at the same time, they also understand that it's going to take time, right? Because it's not going to happen overnight, similarly to the cloud migration. So hopefully this 3 points kind of make sense to you.
Oh, well, definitely it makes a lot of sense, and that's a very interesting perspective. I think it's clear that while each country has its own set of challenges, the adaptability of the industry has allowed for significant growth and resilience, I must say. I think you also mentioned about fintech being both a collaborator as well as a competitor for the financial services sector. But as the financial sector continues to adopt more advanced technology, it's really important to talk about the vulnerabilities as well. Now, the shift towards digital services has opened up definitely incredible possibilities, but it has also exposed institution to new risks. Emerging technology risks are about the uncertainties of adopting new and disruptive technologies. So, for example, cloud computing offers flexibility and scalability, but it also introduces risks like vendor lock-in, skills gap, and potential service outages. Now, unlike traditional business risks, which can be often mitigated through some very standard and established contingency plans, these new emerging technology risks require quite a proactive approach. For example, environmental scanning or a scenario analysis. So, I want to understand from you what are some of the key vulnerabilities that the financial institution should be really aware of, as in when the sector is moving towards a complete digital transformation.
Right, and you actually mentioned some very interesting points there. I'll point out the one that you mentioned around resilience. So resilience is going to be extremely critical to a financial organization because finance is one of the core pillars of every nation's national economy. So it's actually the prosperity pillar of a nation's economy. So it's extremely critical to the entire country and the society as well. To ensure that the banks remain open at all times is absolutely essential. However, because of the rate the banks and the financial institutions in India are adopting new and cutting edge technology at a rapid pace, there are situations where security kind of falls through the gaps at some point. And this is something that we all acknowledge. and it happens to other industries too. However, the problem sets in because finance is a little bit different from other industry. Finance, because of the nature of the industry, is always under constant attack. It's always constantly targeted for cyber attacks. It's not something that is opportunistic. It's not something that happens as a coincidence. Financial organizations will always be under attack by cyber criminals. And because of that, financial security leaders do not have the luxury to sit back and figure out and try to adapt. How do I do security for this new set of technologies we've just procured? For example, they don't have the time, which relates back to the second point you mentioned earlier of being more proactive. So a lot of financial organizations are thinking many, many steps ahead in terms of before we actually acquire that technology, before we even embrace that technology, we need to figure out, we need to do the threat modeling, we need to understand the risk, and we need to think about mitigations way ahead before that happens. So a very good example would be AI, for example. So that is being very rigorously experimented on by everyone, but financial security leaders are already thinking way ahead in terms of, how do I protect this? What is the compliance, downfall? What are the privacy downfalls? What are the things we need to start thinking about of protecting all these AI models? So that is one very good example. But if I were to name a few vulnerabilities that institutions should be, very well aware of, I would say first one would be APIs, because APIs, as I mentioned earlier, whether you're leveraging on your digital supply chain, on fintechs as a collaborative partner, or you're opening up your application, your banking applications to a foreign bank because you're doing business across the border in a new country, for example, and APIs are really there to broker data between these many different applications so that everybody are getting the same set of data without knowing how to do it on the other end. API works magically to facilitate that. However, at the same time, when API becomes the so-called digital glue that sticks different applications together across the world, it suddenly becomes a very, very big target. And cyber criminals know that because now data is not just traversing from applications to other applications. It's going through this one big API that is connected to maybe 300 other systems, for example. So it's going to be very, very heavily targeted. In fact, we're already seeing an increase in API attacks over here in Asia Pacific already in finance because of massive digitization efforts. So that's APIs. So the third one is around advanced threats. And because I mentioned financial organizations are continuously under attack, drawing attention not only from cyber criminals that are out to make a profit, but also from advanced threat actors that are usually nation state aligned actors that are out to cause disruption to a nation's economy, for example. So there will be situations of advanced threats like ransomware or highly evasive malware for espionage purposes that would target financial organizations. So when we look at these, financial organizations also need to think about how do I detect, contain, and mitigate all this advanced malware like ransomware, for example, so that our operations do not get disrupted and so that we don't violate very, very, very tight regulations as set forth by RBI, for example. So if you put all those together, it's really thinking about threats that are trying to get into the organization, like API threats, for example, and also threats that might have already or that are already inside the organization, like ransomware, for example. So the banks would, or the financial organizations will actually need to look at these from different angles to understand these are the risks and what do we need to do about them, for example.
Definitely, I think that's really important when we are talking about the risk, and those are really critical points that you mentioned because the balance between innovation and security is so important, especially in a sector as sensitive as finance. And talking about vulnerabilities, I think these are some of the flaws which the cyber attackers can exploit easily. Now, we have discussed about technologies, and particularly, I would like to talk about technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning, because the implementation of these technologies can somehow automate the vulnerability management to boost efficiency. Now, ML algorithms can scan systems to detect potential vulnerabilities and then prioritize them as per the risk level. Now, companies, I mean, it's not possible that they'll wait for a cyber attack to happen. So, like I mentioned earlier, you really have to be proactive here. So, you cannot just wait for cyber attacks to occur. Instead, you really need a practical approach. And that's where I guess machine learning comes into picture. So, I want to understand from you, how do you see the role of AI or machine learning in identifying these potential vulnerabilities and how it can also address them in the financial sector?
That's a good question. I think AI and machine learning in particular, which is really a subset of AI, is going to be essential in all cybersecurity controls moving forward because of how things are evolving so quickly, like Gen AI adoption and how cyber attacks are being powered by some of those as well. Is going to be more challenging to use traditional defense mechanisms in the past to really identify and stop this kind of new generation attacks. So AI or machine learning in particular has been used in cybersecurity for a very long time, as in contrast to what most people think. So it's just that for example, in Akamai, we don't really talk about it, but it's inside almost every of our solutions because when you look at cybersecurity, you're actually scanning and looking at a massive amount of data that's going back and forth. So in those massive amount of data, the volume of data, there's going to be good data, there's going to be bad data, like attacks, for example, and there's going to be data that we're not really sure that is this good or this bad. We don't know. We need to investigate further. So this is where machine learning comes into place. Machine learning will actually try to understand the gray area. So looking at the suspicious traffic or suspicious artifact that's going through, they need to understand the behavior, they need to understand the pattern, they need to recognize the differences and identify all the different things it's done before and will be doing moving forward, and then come to a conclusion that, yep, this is good traffic, let it go, or this is bad traffic, block it. So machine learning has been doing that for a very, very long time because of the sheer amount of data we have to deal with in security every day. What I think moving forward on how this will change over time is that it's going to be not just not an optional piece of technology anymore. It's going to be an essential piece of technology in cybersecurity because it's going to help human defenders, right? You're looking at security analysts, you're talking about incident responders, become more precise and become more effective in how they identify and stop attacks. Because machine learning and AI in particular has the capability to detect very minor nuances in behaviors. In other words, they're very good at finding needles in the haystack. And it's something that humans are very bad at. So machine learning is able to do that, to look at the behavior, understand the deviation of behavior, even if it's the slightest change, they're able to pick it up. And then they're able to let you know if this is, or does this look like an attack, or does this look like an attempt to attack? So what that means to a human defender is that they're going to be much more effective and much more quicker in identifying things like zero-day exploits, as well as advanced threats like ransomware, for example. Because when we put AI into the picture and they start to get working, they're going to learn and they're going to understand what is considered as normal, what is considered as abnormal, what is considered as something I need to look deeper into. So when we look at this from that angle, practical usage of how this can be utilized in financial sector is around, for example, fraud monitoring, right? And I'm not just talking about technological fraud, for example, like abusing APIs or abusing systems that will be done. We're also looking at transaction monitoring for fraud, financial fraud, for example. AI and ML will be a very, very helpful complementary component in that area. Another area and on how it helps financial institutions is around compliance monitoring. So every bank, every financial organization is subjected to compliance, and they want to know, when are we supposedly out of compliance? When are we violating our compliance? And we need to know way beforehand. So the AI or the ML, the machine learning part, is able to scan and identify potential violation and deviations before things get worse by doing things like attack surface analysis in terms of where you're exposed, where you're violating, where you're unprotected. So this is going to help emphasize companies and businesses very much in the near future by really taking that manual effort away from the human and basically doing this and automating this in the background all day long continuously.
Well, that definitely makes a lot of sense, and it's really important. And I mean, it's really incredible to think about how AI can not only detect threats faster than a traditional method, but it also learns and evolves with the challenges it faces. So, this kind of approach could really transform the security in this step. I think now when we're talking about the financial services sector, I think there are a lot of different touch points that are involved. I mean, and speaking of touch points, I think customers today interact with banks specifically through multiple platforms. So there's online banking portals, there are mobile apps. So it's just that they can do anything on the go. This means that security can't just be an afterthought. It needs to be woven into the very fabric of these digital platforms. So how do you think that banks specifically can integrate these security measures across all the digital touch points to protect against the potential vulnerabilities and threats, especially in today's fast-paced and digital-first environment?
Sure. So I think this is something that is quite common today in terms of, there are so many touch points, digital touch points across the board, and each of them are introducing a different type of risk into the organization, and they need to figure out what is the best way to get that holistic protection across the board. So I think the first thing is, or the first thing that financial organizations and banks need to do is to think about implementing a centralized security strategy. Because you don't start with the technology that would be quite counterintuitive. You start with the strategy first to understand what are you protecting and what are you protecting against. So having a centralized security strategy, such as zero trust, for example, is able to help banks map out all the different touch points, giving them the holistic visibility that they need, as well as understand the different level of risk that is posed at every level. For example, there are areas that would require continuous verification of users, devices, and application. And every access request, whether from an online banking platform, a mobile banking app, API, or even a employee device like a laptop, for example, should be authenticated and authorized based on real-time risk assessment. After which they should look at the various security technologies that will help them to align to and streamline that approach. So, for example, when we look at things like zero trust, we would immediately think about zero trust access, zero trust segmentation, zero trust for networks, zero trust for workloads, and so on, following best practices. So this is really where we start to think about what are the technologies that's able to help me to accelerate that particular objective or the journey to reach that objective. Because when we look at all the digital touch points, there's quite a lot of them. And the key to really understand and improve the success rate of a zero trust implementation is to have that holistic visibility. Because nothing works without visibility, because you don't know what you're protecting and you don't know what you're protecting against. So by getting that visibility in terms of, for example, is this an API? Which application is this API connected to? What data is this API processing or transferring? Is this data sensitive? If it's sensitive, is it subjected to a specific regulation like PCI DSS, for example? So all these things comes into play, and this will trigger a lot of thought process around, so what kind of controls do we need to mitigate the risk of data exposure, for example? So by having that approach, they're now able to understand and select the various technologies that's able to help them to augment and streamline that approach. For example, zero trust platforms that enforces secure employee access and network microsegmentation, for example, and also API security platforms that stops real-time attacks are very, very common because these two cover a wide range of security use cases without the complexity of managing multiple security tools, which is what a lot of banks today are struggling with. Hopefully that makes sense.
Well, yes, I think it's very important when we're talking about security measures that banks can, undertake in terms of protecting the customers across every digital touch points. Because, I mean, with changing customer behaviors, I mean, there are changing, the threat landscape is also evolving. So, the digital savvy customers are accelerating the move away from physical currency, and they're creating a cashless economy. So what's more is also the demand convenience at every step, and particularly during the payment process. So for financial institutions, keeping up with the latest tech trend is very essential to remain competitive and also ensuring customer satisfaction. And I guess it's no secret that artificial intelligence will definitely play a very important role in reshaping the financial services industry. Having said that, one last question for you, Ruben. How do you see the future trends of integration of technology in the FSI sector? And what are certain trends in terms of the security landscape as well?
Sure. I think the first one that is really big right now in the financial world is around APIs, because APIs is not just about making two different applications share data. API is actually accelerating or unlocking tremendous value between financial organizations, different fintechs, as well as their peers across the world. So on an international scale, there's something called open banking, which I know a lot of banks in India are participating. I think in India, they also call it banking as a service. It actually means the same thing. So even I think India has also released something called the India Stack, which is a set of open APIs that is authorized by the government to promote API adoption across various industries and to promote collaboration between private and public sectors, really to unlock that additional prosperity and to benefit the overall economy. So because of that, API is going to be very front and center in the finance industry. And also, if we look at the fastest moving thing right now is AI. If you look at it from that angle, AI itself needs APIs to work, because AI on its own, like an LLM model, for example, is learning and is processing and is inferencing data, but the response would need to go via an API to get things done. So for example, I can use an LLM to tell it to create a slide for me to show my latest sales figures. That LLM model will need to connect to an API that is connected to a PowerPoint application, for example, to generate that slide out for me. So in other words, it actually needs an API for output to get things done. So in other words, API is going to be more important than ever before moving forward into the very near future for financial organizations. But as mentioned early on in the session, API itself does come with its own level of risk and threats we need to think about and protect it against. So this is one key consideration for banks. The other one is around digital payment security. So India is going through a rapid transformation in terms of how do we not just be on par with developed nations around digital payments, but also how do we leapfrog them, leapfrog those developed nations too? Because believe it or not, a lot of developed nations are actually still struggling with a unified payment interface like UPI. In India, for example, they still can't get it done properly, like what India has been doing all these years. So India is considering around, how do I provide even better protection, even better security around my digital payments, like UPI and digital wallets and so on, and really move beyond the traditional authentication we're doing today via OTPs and so on, and really look at the user behavior and biometrics and introduce that into future payment security to make it even more secure. And we're also looking at cryptography as something that I believe would change over time, because I think a lot of folks would know that the latest PQC, or the post-quantum cryptography standards, has been released already, and banks are going to be, or soon going to be, regulated or enforced to update their cryptography standards to better protect the data against quantum hacking, for example. So these are a couple of things I see that is emerging right now that could prove to be, you know, become more realistic in the very near future. But these are moving very quickly, so who knows? It may be here sooner than we think.
Well, yes, definitely. I think businesses that don't keep up with software updates or hardware maintenance and application security risks are typically being attacked. And as cyber threats grow, organization must invest in better cybersecurity to protect data, comply with regulations, focus on vulnerability management, and use NIST framework and shift spending to security to avoid costly violations. And also, we have learned that while the integration of advanced technology presents its own set of vulnerabilities, there's also immense potential for innovation, particularly in AI and machine learning, to help these financial institutions stay ahead of the curve. And as we look towards the future, it's clear that security will remain a key focus as the industry continues to evolve. Ruben, thank you so much for sharing your deep insights into the challenges and opportunities facing the financial services sector, also highlighting on the Indian landscape especially as it navigates the complexities of technology and security. Thank you so much for your time and effort.
Thank you very much for having me, Priya.
Thank you, Ruben. And this is for our audience. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to look up all our podcasts on Spotify and other leading platforms and learn more about our conversations with industry leaders as we continue to explore the world of finance, technology, and beyond. Until next time, stay safe and stay informed. Thank you so much.